In this lesson, we're going to be talking about using DNS to extract information. DNS is the domain name service, and the domain name service exists because it's easier to remember things that look more like words than it is to remember a series of numbers. So nobody's going to walk around remembering IP addresses, so we have to have mnemonics, which means we have to have ways of referring to systems and hosts and servers on the internet without referring to them by their IP address. So we need to use something called the domain name system, or DNS, in order to do that translation from hostname to IP address and from IP address to hostname. So we're going to show you a few different ways to extract information from DNS. The first little utility I'm going to show you runs on just about all systems that run TCP/IP. It certainly runs on Windows and Unix. It's called NSLookup. So I'm in Windows here. I'm going to run NSLookup, and you can see I've started up and it's telling me what my DNS server is. As a default, I can actually change that, and I'm going to change that to 4.2.2.1. And now I can just type in a host name here, and it's telling me that this host name, www.infiniteskills.com, is actually an alias for infiniteskills.com, and that has the address 76.12.59.46. Something else I can do with NSLookup is look up different types of records in DNS. In DNS, there are several different types of records. One of them happens to be the A record, which is what I just looked up here. So the A record translates a host name to an IP address. A pointer record, or PTR record, does the reverse, which is IP address to host name. I can also do MX, which is the mail exchanger record. That's another type that I can look up. So I can look up the mail exchanger records for the domain infiniteskills.com, and you can see here I've got several MX records with different preferences, and the preference indicates the hierarchical order in which these different mail exchangers should be used. I can also do set type equals SOA, and if I type infinite skills again, I get the start of authority record. So I've got the primary name server, the responsible mail address, the serial number, the refresh rate, retry, expire, and the default time to live. So that's all information about the domain Infinite Skills, and that's all stored in a record called the SOA record, or the start of authority record. Now, another tool that you can use is more of a Unix thing, and that's something called host, where I can just do infiniteskills.com. And host will just do a very quick and simple lookup without a lot of frills and without a lot of extraneous information or a lot of other stuff that you've got to read through. It says here that www.infiniteskills.com is an alias for infiniteskills.com, shows me the IP address, and because it's a reference to the domain name as host name, it also gives me the mail exchanger records. So that's the host command, and as I said, that runs on Unix. I could do host 4.2.2.1, and that will do a reverse lookup as well. So I can look up things very quickly with host. Now, there's another tool that I can use if I want to get into a lot of detail. I can use dig, and I can dig infiniteskills.com. And that tells me that infiniteskills.com has an IP address, and it actually tells you the record type that it's got. You see in A there, tells me it's an A record, and that's 76.12.59.46. It also gives me information about how long the query took in the server that it used to do that. So I could change the server that I'm going to and do the same query. And you can see I did a dig at 4.2.2.1. That tells dig that I want to use that IP address as my server. When it goes and does the query, it should query that server rather than the default server. So it went out to 4.2.2.1 and queried for that particular piece of information. And you can see at the bottom again, I've got the server and how long it took. In this case, it took 50 milliseconds, and the message size was 52 bytes. Same thing here as with NSLOOKUP. I could do digmx, and that's going to give me the MX record. I can do dig-SOA. I could do dig-SRV. So I can look up any of the record types using dig. Dig has a lot of information about the question, the authority, which server it's using, how long it took, and the message size that it came back with. I could do a dig PTR 174.118.14.72. It tells me that particular address doesn't actually have a host name attached to it. It does tell me the root server that it went to in order to look up that particular information. It's got some information about the start of authority record for that particular server. Now, something else I can do with dig, and this doesn't work as often as it used to in the past. Used to be you could list servers from the domain. So if I were to use NSLOOKUP, like I could do ls, and that would list the servers for a particular domain. I could dump the entire DNS table. Most people don't allow things called domain transfers, but it's often worthwhile just to give it a try. What I would do would be dig AXFR, which means I want to do a transfer of A records, and it's basically going to list the host names if it works. In this case, it's not going to work because they don't allow transfers. You can see transfer failed. But since it's such a quick little test, it's worthwhile doing the dig AXFR just to see if you can get the list of domain names and see whether you can get that list and provide some jumping off points for places that you can go looking. So that's information about how to use DNS and the various DNS-related tools to extract information about your target.